Margaret Foster had exactly 24 hours left to live when she appeared on Family Feud, but Steve Harvey had no idea until she whispered the devastating truth during a commercial break. Her confession about why she chose to spend her last day on his show left everyone speechless. It was Thursday, April 18th, 2024. During what appeared to be a regular Family Feud taping at the Atlanta studios, the Foster family from Nashville, Tennessee, was competing against the Coleman family from Birmingham, Alabama. The show had been proceeding normally, through the first two rounds with both families playing well and the audience engaged. But sitting quietly with remarkable composure in the Foster family lineup was 67-year-old Margaret Foster, a retired elementary school teacher who had made a decision that would soon shock everyone in the studio. What nobody knew was that Margaret Foster had signed papers that morning authorizing doctors to discontinue her life support the following day, and she had chosen to spend her final 24 hours doing something that would bring joy, not just to herself, but to millions of people. Margaret Foster had been battling pancreatic cancer for 14 months, and 3 days earlier her doctors had delivered the news she had been preparing for. There was nothing more they could do. The cancer had spread throughout her body, and even with life support, she had perhaps a week left. But Margaret Foster had spent 43 years as an elementary school teacher, and she had learned that the most important lessons often came in the final moments. She was determined to make her last day on earth a lesson in courage, grace, and finding joy, even in the face of death. Against her family's wishes and her doctor's concerns, Margaret had insisted on keeping her Family Feud appearance scheduled for the day before she would enter hospice care for the final time. "I want my last conscious act to be making people laugh," Margaret had told her daughter Carol the night before. "I've spent my whole life trying to teach children how to face difficult things with courage. This is my final lesson." During the first two rounds of Family Feud, Margaret had played with remarkable energy and enthusiasm, giving solid answers and encouraging her family members with the same supportive spirit she had brought to her classroom for decades. But as the show progressed, the weight of her secret began to overwhelm her. Every joke Steve Harvey made, every moment of family celebration, every second of joy felt precious and final to Margaret, in a way that no one else could understand. During the second commercial break, as Steve Harvey was walking past the Foster family section, Margaret made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Harvey," she said quietly, reaching out to gently touch his arm, "could I speak with you privately for just a moment?" Steve Harvey, always willing to connect with contestants during breaks, walked over to Margaret with his usual warm demeanor. "What's on your mind, Mrs. Foster?" Steve asked kindly. Margaret looked at her family members who were chatting excitedly about the game, then back at Steve. "Mr. Harvey, I need to tell you something, and it's going to change how you feel about the rest of this show," Margaret said, her voice calm but serious. Steve's expression shifted from casual interest to concern. "What is it?" Margaret took a deep breath and delivered the news that would transform everything. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'm going into hospice care for the final time. My life support will be discontinued, and I will die peacefully with my family around me," Margaret said with remarkable composure. "Today is my last day on earth, and I chose to spend it here with you and my family." Steve Harvey stared at Margaret Foster, processing what she had just told him. The casual energy of the commercial break suddenly felt surreal and inappropriate. Steve Harvey looked at Margaret Foster with a mixture of shock, admiration, and heartbreak. "Mrs. Foster," Steve said quietly, "are you telling me that you're going to die tomorrow and you chose to spend your final day playing Family Feud?" "Yes, sir," Margaret replied simply. "I've been a teacher for 43 years, and I've learned that how you face your last day says everything about how you lived your life. I want to face it with joy, surrounded by people I love, doing something that makes other people happy." Steve was visibly struggling to process the magnitude of what Margaret was telling him. "Does your family know?" Steve asked. Margaret nodded toward her family members. "They know I'm dying. They don't know that tomorrow is the day. I didn't want them to spend our last hours together crying instead of celebrating." Steve Harvey found himself in an unprecedented situation. He was hosting a game show that was supposed to be light entertainment, but he was talking to a woman who was treating it as her final public act. "Mrs. Foster, what do you want me to do with this information?" Steve asked. "Do you want me to tell the audience? Do you want to continue with the game? Do you want to stop everything?" Margaret looked at Steve with the clarity that comes from facing ultimate truth. "Mr. Harvey, I want you to continue with the show exactly as you would if I weren't dying," she said, But I wanted you to know because when someone is spending their last day with you, they deserve your full attention and respect." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I didn't come here for pity or special treatment. I came here because your show represents everything I love about life. Family, laughter, connection, and joy. I want my last day to be full of those things." Steve Harvey made a choice that would define the remainder of the taping. He would honor Margaret's wish to continue the show normally, but he would also honor her courage by giving her the most meaningful Family Feud experience possible. "Mrs. Foster, it would be my honor to spend your last day with you," Steve said with profound respect. "And I promise you that we're going to make this the most joyful, loving Family Feud episode we've ever filmed." Steve walked back to his podium with a completely transformed perspective on what they were doing. This wasn't just a game show anymore. It was a celebration of one woman's life and courage. When the cameras started rolling again, something had fundamentally changed in the studio. Steve Harvey's energy was different, more intentional, more present, more deeply connected to each moment. Margaret Foster played the remainder of the game with remarkable spirit and skill, but everyone who was paying attention could see that Steve was treating her with a special reverence that elevated the entire experience. When Margaret gave a particularly good answer, Steve's celebration felt more meaningful. When she made a joke, his laughter seemed more genuine. When she encouraged her family members, his appreciation was deeper. The Foster family made it to Fast Money, and the decision was made that Margaret should play the final round. As she approached the podium, Steve Harvey did something unprecedented. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve announced to the studio audience, "Mrs. Margaret Foster is a retired elementary school teacher who has spent 43 years shaping young minds and hearts. Tonight, she's going to show us all what grace and courage look like." Steve didn't reveal Margaret's secret to the audience, but his words carried a weight that made everyone pay closer attention to what was about to happen. Margaret Foster played Fast Money with the confidence and joy of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to celebrate. Her answers were quick, thoughtful, and delivered with a smile that radiated pure happiness. "Name something teachers do that parents appreciate. Listen to their children." 32 points. "Name something people do when they're proud." Smile. 28 points. "Name something that gets better with age." Wisdom. 31 points. "Name something children remember about their favorite teacher. They cared about me." 35 points. "Name something that makes life worth living." Love. 29 points. Margaret scored 155 points. And when combined with her family's first-round score, they had won. But the victory felt secondary to witnessing someone face their final day with such grace and joy. When the Foster family won their game, their celebration was different from typical Family Feud victories. Margaret was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, all of whom were crying with joy at their grandmother's final triumph. Steve Harvey joined their celebration, but his embrace with Margaret lasted longer than usual, and when he pulled away, both of them were crying. "Mrs. Foster, thank you for sharing your final day with us," Steve whispered to her off camera. "You've taught all of us what courage looks like." After the taping concluded, Steve Harvey spent an additional hour with the Foster family, talking with Margaret about her life, her career, and her philosophy about facing death with dignity. "Mr. Harvey, I want you to know that this has been the perfect final day," Margaret told him. "I got to laugh. I got to celebrate with my family. I got to feel useful and joyful right up until the end." Steve was profoundly moved by Margaret's perspective. "Mrs. Foster, you've changed how I think about every day I have left," Steve replied. "You've shown me that life isn't about how much time you have. It's about what you do with the time you're given." That evening, Margaret Foster spent her final hours at home, surrounded by her family, watching the news coverage of her Family Feud appearance. She had achieved her goal of ending her life on a note of joy and celebration. Margaret Foster died peacefully the following morning, exactly as she had planned, holding her daughter's hand and smiling at the memory of her final day. When the Family Feud episode aired 3 weeks later, Steve Harvey opened the show with a tribute to Margaret Foster that moved millions of viewers to tears. Today's show is dedicated to Mrs. Margaret Foster, a teacher who spent her final day teaching all of us the most important lesson of all: how to live fully, love deeply, and face the end of life with courage and grace. The episode became one of the most watched and most shared Family Feud episodes in the show's history. Margaret Foster's story inspired the creation of the Final Wishes Foundation, which helps terminally ill patients fulfill their last requests and spend their final days doing things that bring them joy. Margaret showed us that dying doesn't have to be just about sadness, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, who now runs the foundation. Sometimes it can be about celebrating the life that was lived. Margaret Foster's former students, many now adults with children of their own, created a scholarship fund in her memory that helps future teachers pursue their education. The scholarship's motto, taken from Margaret's final Fast Money answer, is "They cared about me," recognizing teachers who go above and beyond to show students they matter. Margaret Foster's final day profoundly changed how Steve Harvey approached his work and his life. He began incorporating messages about making each day count and facing difficult times with courage into all his shows. Margaret taught me that every day is someone's last day and every interaction might be someone's final memory, Steve said in later interviews. That knowledge makes you want to bring your best self to every moment. Margaret's story became a case study in palliative care programs, demonstrating how patients can maintain dignity, joy, and purpose even in their final days. Margaret Foster showed that a good death isn't just about managing pain. It's about celebrating life right up until the end, noted Dr. Robert Martinez, a hospice care specialist. The Foster family has said that Margaret's decision to spend her final day on Family Feud gave them a joyful final memory instead of just a sad goodbye. Mom taught us that dying can be an act of love, her daughter Carol explained. She chose to spend her last day making us laugh and showing us how to be brave. Margaret's episode generated thousands of messages from viewers who were inspired to spend more quality time with their own aging family members and to approach their own mortality with less fear. Watching Margaret face death with such grace made me realize I need to face life with more courage, wrote one viewer who became a regular volunteer at local hospice centers. Margaret Foster's choice to spend her last day on Family Feud proved that the end of life can be about celebration rather than just sadness, and that courage in the face of death can inspire others to live more fully. Steve Harvey's response to her secret showed that true humanity means honoring people's final wishes and treating their last moments as sacred opportunities for connection. Today, Margaret Foster's Family Feud appearance is shown in teacher training programs, hospice care facilities, and grief counseling centers as an example of how to face life's ultimate challenge with dignity and grace. Her decision to spend her final 24 hours bringing joy to others instead of focusing on her own sadness created a legacy that continues to inspire people facing their own mortality. The teacher who made Family Feud her final classroom taught millions of people the most important lesson of all, that how we choose to spend our last day reveals everything about how we lived our entire life. Margaret Foster's secret about dying tomorrow transformed a simple game show into a profound meditation on courage, love, and the power of choosing joy even in the face of the ultimate challenge.